Hello, welcome back to the Commercial Real Estate Talk podcast. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Podcast, Commercial Real Estate Talk, episode 129, Biden's rent caps. We put out a little teaser yesterday regarding his own words. We covered the announcement where he clearly, bright-eyed, looked at the camera and said, we're going to lower or put a cap for $55 on the rents. And so that probably sent the markets crashing. All the real estate investment trust funds probably crashed for an hour or two until the White House had an opportunity to redact that statement and change it to a 5% cap rate. Now, there's a bunch of carve-outs, a bunch of stuff that goes into it, but a couple of things that we want to highlight today. Number one, is this a good idea? Are rent caps even an American idea, right? Is this a good idea? Yeah, sure, they've tried it in China, they've tried it in Venezuela, they've even tried this in New York. So go figure. Does it work? Is it a good idea? We're also going to talk about the carve-outs. And here's a question I want to leave you with as we go through these articles. And I'm just going to really fly through this, try to do it as quickly as possible. But if the president is so principled, if he believes that the best way to curtail rising costs, housing costs for Americans is rent caps, if that's what he's coming from, this is what's best for America, why now? Why now? Less than 4 months before an election. Why not enter the office in 2021, early 2021, when, according to one of the articles that we'll see, rents were about $1,150 on average? Why not then come in and impose a rent cap then? Say, hey, Americans, this is what's best. We believe in rent caps. This is a way to stymie increases and make housing more affordable. Why wait through all of 2021 when things started taking off, all of 2022 when we were under massive inflation, all of 2023 when we were under massive inflation, half of 2024 when we were under massive inflation, and now the average rent on a monthly basis is $1,411, allegedly, according to one of the articles that we're going to take a look at. Why, if this is such a principled, good approach for Americans, one of the articles we're going to read says it keeps Americans in their community long-term, rent caps are great. Well, if that's the case, why now? Why didn't you come in 3.5 years ago and implement this? I question the announcement coming so close to the election, right? I think it's easy to see the motives behind that. And second, have you seen the carve-outs? I mean, if it's under construction or if it's new construction or if it's been recently rehabbed or gone under major renovations, you're carved out of this. Okay, well, that kind of describes almost every single major apartment building. And thirdly, the question of timing. Secondly, the carve-outs. And thirdly, this is going to take an act of Congress. This isn't something the president can do by executive order. He needs a Congress. Well, he understands Congress is divided, Republican and Democrats. Just say the word rent caps and the Republicans say no. And even some Democrats are going to say no to rent caps, not just Republicans. There will be some Democrats who say this isn't popular in our district. So he knows that this isn't going to happen. And fourthly, well, it happens to come during the RNC. So there's a lot of reasons to question this. It's never going to happen, at least not as things are stand in terms of the Congress and the House. So why even make this announcement? It's hard to not see this as a political ploy to scratch the itching ears of folks who might think this is a good idea, to remind them, hey, don't forget to vote for me. But that being said, it gives us a good opportunity to dig into rent caps and why this isn't a good idea. Okay, so this is coming from Market Watch. We're going to be all over the place. Market Watch: Biden proposes nationwide cap on rent hikes to lower housing costs. Experts say it's counterproductive. Federal rent control law will be catastrophic to renters in our nation's rental housing market, one industry leader says. President Joe Biden proposed a cap rent increasing nationwide to 5% in an attempt to rein in surging housing costs, but housing experts are calling the move counterproductive. Again, we've had surging housing costs for 3.5 years. Why now? Biden's proposed policy would restrict how much landlords can increase tenants' rents. The White House said on Tuesday, if landlords hike rents by more than 5%, they will not be able to take advantage of tax breaks related to faster depreciation write-offs according to the policy. So this is how government works. You do what we say, or we're going to find another way to tax you or remove tax incentives from you. It's the advantage of having the sword. The, um, the measures are designed to be in effect for 2 years. So I guess you're out of, after 2 years, hike away. And it will only affect landlords who own more than 50 units, which is only about half the rental properties, the government said. That's about 20 million units in the U.S. The rent caps would not affect newly built rental units. So if you are in an apartment of 49 units, your landlord can do whatever they want, 50, and the landlords have to abide by this 5% cap. So what do you think is going to happen to those landlords who own 49 or less? They're going to lose all their tenants, right? If this actually passed, you'd see every tenant flock to 50 units or higher in order to be a rent cap. And so they could lock it in and stay there however long they want to. And then the 49 units and other are going to just get buried because everyone's going to go to the others. Families deserve housing that's affordable. It's part of the American dream, President Joe Biden stated. In a statement, rent is too high and buying a home is out of reach for too many working families and young Americans. After decades of failure to build enough homes, I'm determined to turn that around. The proposal, okay, again, I'm determined to turn that around because I only have 4 months to go, potentially, until the election. But why didn't this get addressed earlier? We've been talking in South Florida how the millennials and young folks, Generation Z and so forth, can't afford houses down here. But this hasn't been a problem that just popped up. This has been a problem for years. Why not? All right. So the proposal would limit rent increases nationwide, would need congressional approval. A tall order in an election year when Republicans control the House of U.S. Representatives. The Biden administration also announced other programs to address housing costs, such as an effort to repurpose federal land to build housing, and $325 million in grants to build affordable homes in neighborhoods across the nation. Biden's proposal comes as housing costs have soared, with home prices at record highs and mortgage rates elevated. Voters, especially those Gen Z, said the housing affordability is a key issue for them in the November election. Well, there you go. Here's your plan. Though the rent control policy comes at a time when housing costs have hit all-time highs, experts were not convinced of its potential effectiveness. Rent caps generally help with affordability in the short run, but can hurt in the long run. Chen Zhao, economic research lead at Redfin, told MarketWatch. With limits on how much landlords can raise rents, developers would be worried about how profitable their projects would be, which could then affect housing supply in the long run. Zhao said, and unless developers build, the fewer homes there are to rent, worsening affordability. So that's a key. That's one of the arguments against rent caps, besides the fact that it's un-American, it's federal overreach. You see this in China. You see this maybe in Venezuela, where the public sector takes over the private sector and governs, but you usually don't see this in America, except for New York and maybe California. But why is that? One of the reasons is this, what I highlighted here. So limiting how much landlords can raise rents or capping their profitability, okay, is what they're doing, is going to stymie development. You remember, the cost to buy land, the cost to construct, the cost to do all the plans and permits and variances and deal with the cities and do retention ponds and parks and all that good stuff. It's not going away. But if you're doing all that, but then you can't estimate where rents are going to be or how you can move those rents, you're just going to put a kibosh on new development. Well, why is that a problem? Because even the president acknowledged that that's a problem. Come back up here, look at his statement right here. This is from President Joe Biden. Said, rent is too high and buying home is out of reach for too many working families and young Americans after, look at the cause, decades of failure to build enough homes. I'm determined to turn that around. So whether he's right or not, I'm not going to debate, but he said the problem why we have increased housing costs is because developers have spent decades failing to build enough homes. I'm going to turn that around by giving them less incentives to build homes. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. After decades of failure to build enough homes, I'm going to cap their profitability in building homes, and that'll help them. Now, let me give you, to break it down, an example. Let's take oil. Okay, what happened when the former administration was drill, baby, drill? That was their policy. This administration is EV, baby, EV. we're going electric vehicle, and we're going to wean off gas and oil. So what happened? Well, the oil and gas companies who look at drilling and investing in land and equipment and rigs, and they have what's called payback periods and amortization schedules, and they look at a piece of property and say, okay, we're going to pay the millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, if not billions, to extract the oil out of the ground. We're doing that with the hopes that in 25, 30 years, we're going to make our money back in profitability, and we can amortize those costs of financing the equipment, of buying the land. And well, within that 20, 30 years, the current administration said, hey, we're going to do everything we can to get out of oil. So the big oil companies stopped investing in new oil rigs and new ventures in oil because it's a sinking ship. Why invest good money towards a bad investment that is diminishing and disappearing under this administration? And so essentially, that's what's going to happen. And so you wonder why gas prices are high, is because we're not producing as much. Plus, you had all the layers of taxes that the administration has mounted and put on there. That's usually why when one administration takes office that favors oil, oil prices come down. Why? Because there's an incentive for the oil companies to drill more, produce more, invest more, which brings the supply in a greater fashion and brings the cost down. Less supply, higher cost. More supply, lower cost. Well, the same is happening or can potentially happen if you follow the same logic. The president said the problem with housing costs is the developers aren't building enough. So I'm going to make it more difficult for them to be profitable by putting rent caps. That's going to have the exact opposite effect. And that's what a lot of these experts are going to hone in on were we to continue. We're going to read a little bit more, but that's the biggest detriment to rent caps is you stymie development. Why are you going to develop if you're going to tell me at the end this is only how much I can make in profits? I can't guarantee that I can get my return because I'm capped on this end, but you're not capped on this end. So while you're capped on the profitability of rents, you're not capped on the cost to develop, right? The cost of labor, the cost of construction, the cost of the land, the cost of the insurance, and all those costs aren't capped, but I'm going to be capped at the most important spot, the profitability that's going to ensure that I get the returns that my investors and banks and whoever need. So the president has identified a problem to the housing cost, but he is recommending the exact opposite solution to developing more rent caps. All right, so that's one of the big problems, okay? Let's keep going. Other housing experts pointed out to the ineffectiveness of rent caps as a way to limit how much housing prices go up. There are endless examples in America and all around the world that prove that rent control is counterproductive policy idea that ultimately harms renters by distorting market pricing, discouraging new construction, and degrading the quality of rental housing. Bob Broke-Smith, sorry Bob, that last name is tough to be in real estate. Broke-Smith, president and CEO of Mortgage Bankers Association in an industry trade group, said in a statement. He added that while the odds are stacked against this proposal ever passing Congress, a federal rent control law would be catastrophic to renters and our nation's housing market. Some Democrats also disagreed with the idea of using rent control to tame high housing prices. Now, it's a given that Democrats will favor rent control, Republicans will not favor rent control, but according to Obama administration official Jason Furman, who is also an economist and professor at Harvard University. I mean, it seems like he's got good qualifications. This is what he said. Rent control has been about as disgraced as any economic policy in the toolkit. The idea we'd be reviving and expanding it will ultimately make our housing supply problem worse, not better. And that's coming from a former Obama administration official, an economist and professor at Harvard University. So there's no telling how many Democrats feel the same way. And look, there may be some Republicans who think rent control is a good thing. There may be some who don't think it's a good thing. There might be some Democrats who think it's a good or not good. So this is one problem I have with Copilot. And I just want to highlight this just as a side note. So when I Googled Biden rent caps to look for articles so we could discuss, you can see there are no lack of articles. And we played this video of Biden's announcement where he clear-eyed said $55, not 5%. But anyway, that's besides the point. We're used to that by now. Yahoo, CBS News, Roll Call, Yahoo News, NBC, and so forth. But look at over here. This is Copilot, I believe, allegedly. I think that's the Copilot sign. This is the Microsoft AI. And let me point out some flags and holes, folks, so that we could be on alert. It's not neutral, okay? These AI Google searches, they're not neutral. Okay, Biden rank caps. Certainly. I don't understand how that, why such excitement. President Joe Biden has proposed a 5% cap on annual rent increases for tenants of major landlords, which isn't necessarily accurate because it's for apartments, right? This measure aims to address the high cost of housing and curb inflation. However, it would require solid Democratic control of Congress to become law. How is that anything to do with this article? That's my problem with this. First of all, in the second sentence, they're saying they're giving a lot of credence to Biden's intentions. They're aiming to address the high cost of housing and curb inflation. I already trust we've read one article, and there's many experts who disagree whether that's the case or not. But Copilot thinks that rent control aims to bring down the high cost, but however, it would require a solid Democratic control of Congress to become law. Really? Copilot, is that an accurate statement? Aren't you missing something in there? It seems to me that they're doing the Biden's work out loud. This is probably getting at the motive of why Biden made this announcement. Copilot is cutting to the end of the day story here. Is like, this would be good, but folks, we need you to vote all Democrats because this is a great idea to aim to lower the cost, but we need you to go down ballot and get all the Democrats control of the House if this is to happen. I mean, that's really what they're saying here. What they should have said is, however, it requires passing through the House, which is divided between Republicans and Democrats, and it's unlikely going to pass. But to skip saying that it's required the Congress because the president doesn't have the executive order to do this, rent control, put rent caps. But to go, the measure aims to address the high cost of housing curb fear. However, it would require solid Democratic control of Congress, is to insinuate, listen, folks, this is a good idea, but it's going to require you to go vote Democrat. That's how I read this. Maybe some of you think I'm reading too much, but this is very, very troubling because AI and Microsoft Pilot and Google, these things are not biased, right? This is outputting what's being inputted into the algorithms, and it's very concerning. So look, it even continues to say the median national rent was $1,411 a month in June, up from roughly $1,150 in early 2021 when Biden became president. If you have more questions or need further information, feel free to ask, okay? So Microsoft Copilot at least got something right. We've seen massive increases since Biden took office, and what no one is asking is why. And this is what I want to get to with rent caps, and we've got a few more articles to go through regarding that. Here's from Connect CRE and Globe Street and so forth. But why is there even the discussion that we need rent caps? Because rent's through the roof. Housing is through the roof. Gas is through the roof. Your price of eggs and chicken is through the roof. Since when? 2021. So what no one is saying is why. They're just, rent cap is a way of putting a little bit of Bengay cream on your sore shoulder that is getting worse and worse. But let's just numb the pain a little bit. But guess what? When that Bengay wears off, it's going to start hurting again, maybe even worse, because without that pain, you realize there wasn't a problem, and you went out and started throwing a football and shooting hoops and working out, and then the pain management wears off, and now you feel even worse because you did more damage. You've got to find out what is the root cause of that shoulder pain, right? You not just numb it and ignore it. You got to find out what's the cause. So none of these articles are addressing the cause of this massive housing crisis, inflation, which really isn't just in housing. It's in food, it's in automobile, it's in insurance, it's in universities, it's everywhere. Okay, so what's the cause of that? Everyone can acknowledge it started in early 2021 when the president took over, the current president, but no one's willing to say about what's the cause. And we need to get to that. We need to get to that versus just throwing stuff at the wall. That is an attempt to appease voters 4 months before an election, less than 4 months before an election, when it has no shot of ever passing. And there's disagreement even within Democrats whether this is a good idea. So, anyhow, none of this is addressing why. It's just a shot in the dark, which also happens to come during the RNC, right? Coincidentally, let's steer some attention away. Let's throw out some ideas. But anyway, Biden calls for imposing apartment rent caps on corporate landlords, connect CRE. I also don't like when our politicians single out people and go to war with them. You know, what we found out this weekend, and praise God that the Lord spared our country from an assassination, because it could have erupted in chaos. I mean, our country's pretty chaotic now. I cannot imagine what would have happened if that bullet was a few inches one way or the other. So thank you, Lord, for sparing our country from chaos. But hopefully, I'm praying that one of the things that we're learning is our words matter. And if we demonize people by calling them names and Hitler and existential threats and democracy's on the ballot, if we're using inflammatory words like that, then don't be surprised when people act upon that, especially if they're just not right up here, right? I mean, it's very dangerous. Both parties, both sides need to temper it down. And I pray that this was a wake-up call. God was merciful here, and both sides would return to civility. I remember growing up and seeing debates, and even looking at Obama and Romney shake hands, and before and after the debate. We look at a football stadium, right? I like to go to Hurricane football games with my son. And, they play Florida State, and you'll have 60, 70,000 people there cheering for the Hurricanes. No one's asking you for your voter record. No one's asking where you came from. We're all there for one common cause. We want to see the Hurricanes do well, and we're going to cheer together for 3 or 4 hours and come together. Well, why is it something as simple as sports can bring people together? Why can't we, for the love of our nation and the love of our fellow man, come together and say, okay, we're going to have differences, but we want, if your guy gets in the office, I want you to know I'm going to pray for him and do everything to make sure he's successful, because that's what's good for the country. If my guy gets to the office, you're going to do the same. Why can't we agree? At the end of the day, we're Americans, and even if we don't agree on everything, we want what's best for the country, and we're going to pray for our leaders to make wise and godly choices, decisions. So I wish we could return to that, and I pray that this assassination attempt on Trump will be a kind of a call, a wake-up call to our country, and that it has to start. We don't need to look to our political leaders. God's in control. He showed us that, believe me. But we do need our political leaders to lead in this area. We need them to set an example. We need a little humility. How about the next debate, both of them go and shake hands and agree and publicly address the temperature of the country and say, listen, we're going to debate ideas. The battleground is a battle of ideas. It's not physical. It's not violence. And at the end of the day, while we disagree in ideas, we're all Americans. And there's a system of checks and balances. And we need to agree to be civilized and support one another at the end of the day. So we need to see a change in temperature. It's going to need to come from Biden and Trump, from both of them. And I pray we'll see that. And I pray that that we'll look back at what happened this past weekend in Pennsylvania and see, praise God, that was a turning point, and we're in a much better trajectory now. That's my hope. That's my prayer for our country. But back to rent caps, because this reminds us this is a battle of ideas. Okay. Now we can look at history, and some of these articles are going to point out how this is not such a good idea, and this is something that usually doesn't happen in a free market society, a capitalistic society, where the federal government comes in and says how much you're able to profit. But this is where we are. All right, so this article covers President Joe Biden. Now it talks about the rent caps that apply to landlords more than 50 units, covering more than 20 million, exceptions for new construction, substantial renovation, rehab, and it would only apply for 2 years. The prior administration, according to Biden, gave special tax breaks to corporate landlords. I'm working to lower housing costs for families. Republicans in Congress should join Democrats to pass my plan to lower housing costs for Americans who need relief now. Well, he knows that's not going to happen. So why bother? Except for maybe the optics. All right, in a statement, the Housing Solutions Coalition said this proposal amounts to a typical election year rhetoric. Rent caps, also known as rent control, have never been a viable solution to the ongoing affordability challenges facing our nation's rental housing market. These flawed policies often exacerbate housing shortages, leading to higher end rents and lower quality housing. Let me highlight that so we can talk about that. As the country faces massive housing deficit, common sense solutions are desperately needed that prioritize building more housing, not erecting additional barriers to housing development. And that's what we talked about in the first article. Rent caps are a barrier to building more housing because, again, developers are not in this for altruistic reasons. They are having to buy land. They're having to pay architects and engineers. They're having to hire contractors. They're having to negotiate with cities, sometimes build them parks and schools in order to get their projects off the ground. And they're willing to do all that if there's profits to be made at the end. You can argue how much, whatever. The market's got to decide that. Because listen, if a developer comes in and decides we're going to go in and we're going to build apartments and we're going to charge $5,000 a month in rent, okay, and they go through all that and they build it, and then the market comes out and says $5,000 a month rent for that? I'm not paying for that. And then the spaces sit vacant. Guess what's going to happen? That 5,000 is going to come down to 3, 4, 2,500 until it meets equilibrium with the market, and then people start renting. So that's fundamentally, just very simply, how free markets work. They could charge whatever they want, but if there's no audience, if there's no customer, they're going to lower the rate. We're seeing that happening in some housing markets now as we track what's going on here in South Florida. We're starting to see $100,000 price reduction, $50,000 price reduction. It's not a crime to ask whatever you want. It's just going to take you longer to sell it until you find that equilibrium with the market. That's how America is supposed to work when it comes to free markets. But look what he says. We talked at nauseum already how this is going to create more housing shortages because developers, just like the oil guys, they're not going to invest if they don't know that they can capitalize or pivot. You know, what happens if there's another pandemic? What happens if there's a labor shortage? And all of a sudden, they thought that they can build each unit for 45 or 55,000 a unit, and now it turns into 65 or 75,000. But they're capped. So you see, there's no cap on their expenses, but there's a cap on their profits. That's a big problem for development. It's not going to happen. So if the problem that Biden identified is we need more development, well, this isn't the way to do it. The second problem is lower quality housing. It's the same issue. Now the buildings are built. Now they're run down. Now they need improvements. But if the landlords aren't going to invest in renovating buildings and apartments, if they can't get the money back, if they're going to keep charging the same rent and only have 5% cap, then guess what? They only spend 5% of maintenance or 5% of renovations and so forth. So I'm trying to break it down very simply. But it's not just a problem in the upfront building. It's a problem in the management and maintaining rent caps. So what's going to happen? 5, 10 years, 15, you're going to start seeing apartments run down, not getting renovated, not getting painted, not getting invested because the owners can't increase the rents. They can't keep up with the market. They can't keep up with their costs. Listen, can the landlord turn to the insurance provider, go to Citizens Property Insurance or Lloyd's of London or whoever, Allstate, State Farm, and say, hey, I can only charge 5% more rent, so you can only charge me 5% more in insurance? No, of course not. What about property taxes? They don't have homestead rights. These are commercial. So is there going to be a cap on real estate taxes of no more than 5% for commercial properties if there's a commercial cap on rents? Of course not. What about electricity? Can they go to the FPL and say, hey, you can only charge me no more than 5% because I can't pass that along? Of course not. What about janitorial, labor wages, and so forth? I hope you're starting to see the problem, how in trying to fix one solution, it has a domino effect. And it's just never going to work. It's just never going to work. You're going to have people pull out of these markets and properties start to become run down. And while in a short-term basis, there might be a little bit of a relief, long-term, because we're not keeping up and building more supply, and you're not keeping up and improving and maintaining, it's going to be a far worse situation in 5, 10, 20 years for renters than today. The free markets need to determine this. And that's what hopefully will take place because this will never pass, but it sounds good for some. All right, Globe Street, why Biden's rent cap proposal isn't going to happen. So they go on and let's see here. Let me read from the Cato Institute. It's got no legs, says Mark Calabria, currently senior advisor at the Cato Institute, previously director of the Federal Housing Financing Agency during the Trump administration, before then chief economist for Vice President Mike Pence, and earlier senior aide for U.S. Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, Urban Affairs under Chairman Richard Shelby and Phil Gramm. This gentleman's been pretty busy. He said one strike against the bill is that it requires a change in the tax code, which is harder to do than normal legislation, Calabria said, even though he thinks it might pass constitutional muster because it isn't a spending issue. It can't be tied to a must-pass end-of-year financial bill. He also said this year is almost over in terms of Congress. Getting both House and Senate to consider a bill takes time. Additionally, with the House under Republican control even thinly, the existence of a filibuster in the Senate, it's a non-starter during a presidential election year. Again, so he's just cutting to the chase. This had no shot. Why even talk about it? Why even bring it up? Which is why I question twofold. You bring it up less than 4 months before an election, very convenient. Bring it up during the RNC, very convenient. And third, let's just assume you really were persuaded that this is a great policy and that we need to get this done. Why didn't you do this 3.5 years ago when rents were $1,150? So a 5% cap on $1,150 is a lot less than a 5% cap on $1,411. Why didn't you bring it up 3 years ago if this was a principled decision that you thought was best for America versus maybe a political ploy to try to gain votes? All right, let's look at one more article regarding this subject because it's been done before, right? New York has had rent caps and rent controls in certain areas. And let me ask you a question. How many of you want to move to New York anytime soon, Manhattan? And how many of you believe New York's cost of living is less than the city that you're living in without rent control? It's kind of silent, but yeah, I hear you. All right, President Joe Biden's new plan to cap rents, building houses drew mixed reaction in New York. All right, that's the White House plan announced on Tuesday. Today's Wednesday as I record this. The plan was praised by New York tenants. Listen to this. Sia Weaver, Director of Housing Justice for All Coalition. We've got coalitions for everything. Housing Justice for All. President Biden is right, she said, or he said. I'm not sure how CEA is, it he or she. Rent caps ensure families can set roots in their communities and stay for the long term. Rent caps ensure families can stay in their communities and stay for the long term. Now, I don't know about these communities, but I would venture to say if you go visit a community that has had long-term rent caps, and then you go visit a community that has not had long-term rent caps, let me know which community you'd want to live in. That would be my comment to that. And we just have to go to China or Cuba or Venezuela, or maybe even Russia, and see how rent caps work there. But this is the principle that I'm talking about. According to Weaver, families can set roots in their communities and stay for the long term. Well, if it's such a good thing for families to stay in their communities for the long term and place roots, why did we wait till less than 4 months before the election and 3.5 years of out of control inflation to introduce this? Why wasn't this number one priority day one in the office in early 2021? Who doesn't want families to be rooted in their communities and stay for long term? So if that's what rent caps do, why wasn't this a bigger priority? Why did you wait for all of 2021, all of 2022, all of 2023, most of 2024? Now in the back half, say, hey, I got a good idea. You know, if I have cancer diagnosis and I'm 3.5 years into fighting this cancer, and now I'm kind of down to the doctors, you have 4 months to live. And then the doctor comes and says, hey, you know what? I got the solution for you. Let's start taking this medicine. I'm going to tell the doctor, why did you know about this back in 2021 when I got the cancer diagnosis? Yeah. Did you know it was effective and you really believed this was the solution? Yeah. Well, why didn't you tell me? When I could have treated it when it was earlier and it could have been treated. You see, if this was the solution, it would have been much better to implement this in early 2021 before all the inflation and housing crisis. Why now? Things that make you go, remember that show Arsenio Hall used to say? But listen, here's a counterpoint. So we had the Housing Justice for All coalition, and now you have the Rent Stabilization Association. So we've got associations and coalitions for everybody. A group of 25,000 landlords in the metropolitan area turned thumbs down. 75 years of trying to cap rents in New York City has not made New York City more affordable. It's been a disaster for taxpayers. It hasn't created the new housing. Frank Ricci, the association's executive vice president, said. All right, there you have it. So you got two opposing views. One says in New York, rent caps have allowed people to stay in their community and place roots. The other one says it's been a disaster for New York City, for taxpayers, and it's not creating new housing, which, again, that's a case study. New York City, 75 years, and who wants to develop when you're capped on one side of profits, but you're not capped on your expenses side? Just makes sense, folks. Commercial real estate at the end of the day is a business. It's not so much about bricks and mortars. Bricks and mortars are a vehicle in order for folks to get a financial model, and it's a financial vehicle. And so if you're capped on one end but not on the other, it's not going to work. And that's what Mr. Frank Ricci is saying has been the outcome in New York City. Case study. So is that what we want for the nation? Well, fortunately, I don't believe this is going to pass. I think this is one of those that politicians throw things out there because it sounds good, and we won't be seeing rent caps. But again, my interest is more in the commercial real estate aspect of it, and the free markets aspect of it, and how this could stymie development and really crush commercial real estate if the federal government ever did get serious or were able to implement something as rent control, rent caps federally. That would be a problem, and I'm not sure how that could work. I'm sure the Supreme Court would probably say, yeah, you're overstepping your bounds a little bit there. Leave it up to the states. Like New York is doing it. Probably some areas of California is doing it. So if you want to live in an area that has rent control, go move to New York. I'm sure it's cheaper to live there than where you're currently living. Okay, look, much more can be said. We already, I've got a 2 or 3 minute teaser where we watched the president's speech, where he inadvertently said $55, clear-eyed, looking right at the teleprompter, said it was $55. Again, be careful with Copilot. Take it for what it's worth. There's the way this was written, I have a lot of questions. And you can see there's a big debate over this whole thing. And frankly, one of the biggest debates should be, is what caused the problem? What caused rents and housing to spike over the last 3.5 years? I've got my thoughts and theories, but I'm not an expert in these financial issues, so I'll keep them reserved. Leave a comment below. Why don't we start a dialogue here on whether you're tuning in through LinkedIn or the YouTube channel, Commercial Real Estate. You can find us at Commercial Real Estate Help or CRE Help. And let's start a dialogue. What is the solution? If rent caps isn't the solution, and I don't know if I build that case, but you can tell that I don't think so. I do think it'll stymie development, and I think it's going to produce a lot of worn down environments for renters. So while in the next year or two, maybe, hey, yay, my rent only went up 5%. I think long term, you're going to say, why isn't the landlord fixing my plumbing? Why is my carpet not being replaced? Why is the hallways? Why do I have a 15-year air conditioning unit and they keep licking and sticking it instead of replacing it? Well, guess what? You wanted those rent caps. Why aren't they building across the street? Why aren't there any more new construction? Well, you wanted your rent cap. So I think long term, it's not going to be effective. It's going to be counterproductive. But again, my opinion, I agree with Obama's official there who works at Harvard and is a professor there. So, but give us your thoughts. What caused the spike in housing crisis and rents? What's causing all this massive inflation? I'd love to hear from the community. Let us know how we're doing. Give us a thumbs up on the podcast. Subscribe, please. We are also rolling out these commercial real estate hashtag shorts. Learn commercial real estate in 1 minute. And we're going to cover and continue to cover 1 or 2 of those per week. And hopefully you find those helpful. I know some of them are basic, but believe it or not, I'm not doing one of these shorts that I haven't been asked this on tours by business owners. And even other folks in commercial real estate will ask. Case in point, I was talking to a broker about, we did one on how to calculate monthly rent. And someone made a comment. I love every comment, even though negative ones, because it shows you care. But someone left a comment on how to calculate monthly rent short, 1 minute. If you can't do this math, you have issues. Well, it made me laugh. But listen, I tour space all the time with clients or on behalf of landlords. Hey, what's the rent? $30 a square foot. What is it on a monthly basis? It's always their next question. So then I take out the calculator and I show them how to do the calculation, and I almost inevitably get, oh, that's how you do it. So again, we're trying to break commercial real estate down, commercial real estate made simple at through these shorts, and we're going to have some teaching series coming that'll be about 5 minutes. So some of these shorts lend itself to a little bit longer explanations, and we'll be covering that. So stay tuned. I've seen some of the comments say, hey, why don't you cover this? Why don't you cover that? I can only cover so much in 60 seconds, though I talk fast. And hopefully we'll have that coming out, God willing, for you. But to keep up with all that, you need to subscribe, please. That'll help us get the word out and push the algorithms on YouTube. And of course, if you need commercial real estate solutions in the state of Florida, we're hubbed. I'm doing this recording out of my office in Miami, but we're pretty much throughout South Florida, and even have been helping clients in Orlando and Tampa. So we're happy to get involved as your tenant advisor in some of those key markets. If you have a property that you want us to discuss leasing, whether we're the right team or we can put together the right team and do a best-in-class approach, we're happy to talk to you about that too. Now, how we pay bills, that's through Blue Box Real Estate, blueboxre.com. Okay, that's our commercial real estate wing. So I'm George Morales. Thanks for tuning in. Remember Proverbs 20:18, plans are established by counsel, by wise counsel, wage war. And so that's what we're trying to help to do through these podcasts, is give you good commercial real estate counsel advice. We're not attorneys, we're brokers, but we've been in this for about 30 years now. And we like to pass on some of this to help the community. So thanks for tuning in. God bless. Talk to you again soon in the future. Good day.